Welcome to the 5 on 5 on Memorial Day. We're proud to welcome in Senator Ron Wyden. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me back.
All right, let's get out of the way. First off, we heard there's an announcement of a new family member to be coming up.
I told the staff earlier in the week, and yes, Nancy and I are incredibly excited. Everybody knows I'm a big Blazer fan. I wanted to play in the NBA myself, and now we've got a starting five. And we're going to have a new arrival in December.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to Memorial Day. You've been traveling around some of the services today, but those who have loved ones overseas right now, the latest maybe in Afghanistan, what can you tell some of the Oregonians that have people serving in the military?
I went and saw our soldiers in Afghanistan, and of course the first thing they tell me about is the tremendous problems they're having just breathing. There's such a pollution problem in Kabul and so much of the country. They wanted me to step in and make sure that they had the proper equipment to protect themselves, and also that would go into their medical records. But I think from a bigger standpoint, what we need to do is move away from trying to have what amounts to a counterinsurgency approach and trying to dictate a peace there to what I call a counter-terror approach. We can do that for a lot less money and get more national security.
What's it looking like for an approach like that, timeline?
My sense is that the president is moving in that direction. We all know that he's indicated that he'd like to step up the timetable, but it still has to be implemented. And of course, Oregonians are very concerned about the prospect that we might be there well into the next decade. And I think when you look at this, there are terror threats in a number of parts of the world. And what we ought to be doing is looking less at trying to dictate a peace, rebuild these countries that have seen enormous strife for years, and focus on a counter-terror strategy.
Well, let's move on to another subject close to Oregonians' hearts, these timber payments that keep coming up. Josephine County right now hit really hard. Some closures recently. What is it looking like for those timber payments?
I'm hopeful that some help is on the way. The United States Senate agreed with 80 votes to the proposal that I essentially wrote with the Oregon congressional delegation and would provide 1 year's worth of relief so we could buy ourselves a little bit of time and look at other approaches, particularly to get our folks back into the woods working. We've got millions and millions of acres of overstock stands. We've got to thin them out, get that material to the mills, and put our people back to work. And Oregon's share for 1 year would be over $100 million. That could be a real lifeline for Josephine County and a lot of the rural communities that are hard hit. I wrote the original legislation. Oregon's share has been more than $2 billion over 10 years. But this money, and I'm hopeful that we'll see some results before August. That's when the Senate's going to have the next recess, so that our hard-hit counties could actually get on with providing law enforcement and essential services.
So they can look forward to that August date coming up as maybe a possibility?
I'm pulling out all the stops. The Senate has passed the legislation that I wrote. I wrote it in conjunction with the Oregon congressional delegation, a 1-year version of the bill that I've authored and it's been on the books for 10 years. Oregon's share would be upwards of $100 million, and particularly for small rural areas that are faced with layoffs in terms of law enforcement and schools and basic services. It'd be a lifeline, and that's my target date. I want it done before the August recess. So we'll be back here in a few days, and the Senate has passed it. We've just got to get the House to go along.
All right, I'll have a few more questions for you, so Senator, so stick around. More 5 on 5 right after the break. Welcome back to the 5 on 5. The guest is Senator Ron Wyden. So we've covered a little bit about the troop deployment, the timber payments. How about the economy? Another subject as we get closer to the election. How is the bipartisan work going to help turn the economy around?
Well, my hope is that the Senate will start focusing on bipartisan tax reform. I've written the first bipartisan tax reform proposal in a quarter century with Senator Dan Coates. He's the Republican from Indiana, and it's modeled after what Ronald Reagan and a big group of quite progressive Democrats did in the 80s. That approach created 6.3 million new jobs in just 2 years. And what I like about tax reform is Republicans will say that it's pro-business, and Democrats like the fact that it's populist, that it takes away tax breaks from special interests, and in particular, I take away the tax breaks for shipping jobs overseas and use those very same dollars to reduce rates for American companies doing business here at home.
If you could take us into the rooms, the war rooms, if you will, there in Washington, D.C., what are some of the points that the Republicans and Democrats are seeing eye to eye on? We see every day some of the things they're arguing about, but what are some of the points that you can stand on and maybe build on?
Well, I think last week's action, for example, on the Food and Drug Administration legislation was very important. That is going to speed up the timetables for Americans to be able to get access to affordable medicines. That's going to be a valuable approach. I'm hopeful that we can get legislation that will help our rural post offices. The Senate has already passed legislation that was bipartisan in that area, but the real key is to focus on the big ticket items. That's taxes, health care. I'm working with the Republicans in the House to try to tee up an approach that protects the Medicare guarantee. This goes back to my days as co-director of the Gray Panthers, and we've got to have some approaches that hold down the cost of medicine. That's why I want to lift the restrictions so that Medicare could bargain to hold down the cost of drugs.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Let's do it again soon.
All right. That's it for the 5 on 5 Morning News right after the break.